Welcome to Conquer 6 Testing Challenges, Insights from Onboarding to Maintenance, presented by Applitools. I'm Pam Morgan, and I will be the session host. I'm joined today by my colleague, Heather Versillo, a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Applitools. Heather Versillo is a customer-centric product marketer with more than a decade of enterprise experience within the SaaS and oil industries. She enjoys helping teams build flawless user experiences. But when she's not thinking about testing, you can find her dominating board games or piecing together complex jigsaw puzzles.
Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be chatting about how to overcome 6 critical testing challenges that can slow teams down and make testing feel a little overwhelming at times, and then how Applitools Autonomous can address those. So by the end of this, hopefully you'll have an idea of how Autonomous helps onboard teams efficiently, maintain high test coverage, minimize false positives, and more. So we're going to start with a high-level overview of some challenges and solutions. And after that, we're going to drill down and get a bit more granular into 6 specific challenges. We'll cover onboarding technical and non-technical team members, test coverage, API testing, false positives, test maintenance, and dealing with fragmented a la carte platforms. So at the end of today's session, then, we'll open the floor, like Pam mentioned, for questions. So please feel free to jot those down as we go along and as you have your questions. So let's start jumping in and take a high-level look at some of the challenges that the industry is facing and where Autonomous fits in with these challenges. So some of the challenges that we're seeing teams face today around automated testing is with newer interfaces. We're seeing a huge volume of interfaces, states, scenarios, and you have to verify all of these while they're increasing exponentially. You're getting more browsers and more devices that need to be tested, and people are using various screen sizes. So it's no longer the situation of where 90% of your users are accessing things through a browser, and probably quite often they're accessing it through something like this little phone that's sitting on your desk right now. In addition, the velocity of code changes are coming very, very quickly now. And within the past 2 years, you've got these AI coding co-pilots that are jumping in and producing code even faster. And there's been a number of studies that have come out recently that show that some of those do decrease bug rates, but there's actually some that increase bug rates as well. So you want to check your sources on those and validate what you're getting from it. So testers really need to keep up with all that's happening with UIs. They're obviously much, much more complex than they were a few years ago. And you've got a lot of different technologies that are being used today and newer technologies that haven't necessarily been tested before. And your testing tools have to be able to keep up with all of this. Then we get to environments. Obviously, I mentioned browsers, devices, screen sizes, and even resources as the next challenge here. So definitely within the past couple of years, there have been a number of layoffs in the tech industry, and everyone is being asked to do more with less. So tooling can really help out in these situations to spread out the ability to create tests and maintain them. But some things that you might be experiencing with traditional testing tools, like say Selenium, Tricentis, or Cypress, is that you could have some poor test coverage just purely by the gap between the complexity of scenarios, that velocity of code, and then the ability to keep up with all of it, right? So traditional testing tools that are built out for test automation have scaled pretty linearly, which can cause your poor test coverage, delays with releases, and results in some expensive QA costs because you might need developers or someone with coding skills that can write a lot of these automated tests. And this reality is causing a major testing gap between the testing that's needed and your testing that's actually being performed. So where does Autonomous come in? The way most vendors and testing tools try solving these high-level challenges is by adding incremental quality improvements to each and every step of the testing lifecycle. But as we've seen, this doesn't always work, and in order to solve this, testing has tended to need a reinvention at every step of that life cycle. And Autonomous helps alleviate these challenges by really kind of decoupling testing activities and infusing AI each step of the testing lifecycle for both developers and testers. Autonomous gives a new way to test applications without needing to actually replace your current testing and development workflows so that you and your team can continue working the way you always have. But it does give technical and non-technical users the ability to test at scale. So what is Autonomous exactly? Autonomous is a Gen AI powered end-to-end testing solution that automates the creation, execution, validation, and analysis of testing. And it can auto-generate tests to provide immediate test coverage and extend coverage even further by writing tests in plain English. And we'll dive into more of this as we start to get more granular. So we're now going to break down some of those high-level challenges that teams encounter every day and discuss how Autonomous can effectively address them. Our first challenge here is onboarding. There are some teams that are fully shifted left where the developers or SDETs are doing the testing and prefer to write code with tools like Cypress or Playwright. And you have other teams that have a dedicated QA team with automation engineers and manual testers. And the current tools in the market tend to address either the non-developers or the developers. And anymore, teams on average have 6 to 8 different tools that they're using. But so there's not really a consistent one-stop solution that caters to both of these groups of people. And in reality, teams often consist of both highly technical testers and non-technical testers and stakeholders. So bridging that gap between these groups can be pretty challenging as traditional testing tends to favor technical users. So apart from these diverse skill levels, we have learning curves to deal with then when you have all of these different tools, right? Tools may have complex interfaces or coding requirements that can overwhelm some of these new team members and delays the productivity and their ability to contribute. So in addition, collaboration is incredibly important. And with a lack of unified processes and tools that can create silos where non-technical team members might feel excluded from contributing to your quality assurance efforts. And additionally, teams often struggle to compare, let's say, design specifications. So for example, when QA teams use one set of tools for testing and designers, for example, rely on Figma, it's hard to ensure that the implemented UI aligns with the original design. So this disconnect can then lead to some missed requirements or just wasted cycles resolving mismatches. And finally, consistency is a big one. When you onboard team members, you want them to have a consistent experience, and maintaining consistent onboarding practices is really crucial to ensure that your team members receive the same foundational knowledge and training, and the inconsistencies, those can lead to gaps in understanding and performance again. So where Autonomous jumps in here is, first of all, it has an easy to use website crawler. It really lowers the learning curve for technical and non-technical team members because they can get tests set up really quickly by discovering application URLs. And it also verifies automatically that all URLs are accessible and there's no errors to report on. So we're automatically discovering new pages that are added or pages that might have been removed, and even pages that have failed to load, for example, 404 errors. What you're seeing in the video here, it's showing the interactive browser recorder, which is recording test steps as a user moves through a contact form flow. And at the end here, you'll actually see that this person is able to edit and author tests in plain English. So there's no coding or locator skills required, which makes this pretty easy to understand and maintain. Apart from making this easy to create your tests, when it comes time to see progress, there are intuitive interfaces and dashboards for tracking results that makes it easier for everyone to contribute. So test coverage now. Test coverage has routinely been a challenge in this industry, right? You want to ensure adequate coverage across the UI, backend, and end-to-end workflows, which can be a little daunting. You don't want to miss your critical paths or edge cases, which can leave applications vulnerable to bugs. So you really have to balance this breadth and depth of testing, right? Apart from that, we talked about the complexity of applications anymore. They are extremely dynamic oftentimes. You have modern software that's really changing frequently. It's making it difficult to maintain comprehensive coverage over time. And on top of dynamic applications, every company has a goal to grow, right? Which often means that your applications are growing as well. So scalability can be a real challenge as these applications grow in complexity and feature sets. And that effort required to scale tests or new features or workflows tends to increase as you scale. And you don't want to miss any blind spots. Without having precise tools, your critical areas like visual discrepancies or API interactions might go unchecked, and you don't want those to lead to production issues. So when we jump over and see where autonomous kind of fits in here, the number one item I kind of like to identify or emphasize when discussing coverage is Autonomous's visual AI engine. It's really incredibly easy and fast to test the entire page, including all its elements and their properties, and it helps uncover unexpected bugs too. So visual AI is going to pop up any little visual differences, but you can change matching algorithms to ignore insignificant changes and only catch what really matters. This portion we'll see in a little bit more detail later on as well. So, but when we're looking at coverage, Autonomous gives complete coverage from functional, visual, and API testing, all within the same test. And actually, within this video that you're seeing here on the screen, again, we're seeing the interactive recorder, but we're also seeing the ability to use parameterized variables. So you can execute your test with exact arguments or per row and use a predefined data set if you want. And then one of the wonderful things too is that it adjusts to website changes. So it's automatically going to detect and report new or missing or faulting pages with every single test run. And then we'll start jumping in here to API testing. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of the challenges of API testing, like it's often handled separately from UI or functional testing, which can kind of create some fragmented workflows and lack of integration within your processes. And then also just there's complex interactions. Modern applications tend to rely heavily on APIs, but understanding and testing API behavior alongside that user interface can be a little complex. And that means that teams are often then resorting to manual validation of their API checks, and that can be kind of time consuming and that can be prone to error, right? And then finally, when you do have tests that fail, identifying whether the issue actually lies in the API or the UI can require significant time and effort as you're potentially jumping between tools to figure out where this has failed. So Autonomous also addresses API testing. The video that's playing here, it's going to show us making an API call. You'll be able to see response details and verify that information. So the API testing part of Autonomous is actually like pretty exciting for people who are maybe a little bit frustrated with Postman right now since they recently had a big price increase. But the API testing on Autonomous, it really covers what you need it to, and you'll get the JSON output from it, and then you can verify that again with the variable name. But you can see here all that the API testing can do. So we can initiate HTTP requests, we can move through custom authentication and verify backend states, and it's fully configurable, so you can specify your verbs, your cookies, headers, your body, so on and so forth. And it's going to capture all those response details so you can verify that information, or you can just store it in variables if you want to use it in other test steps. Now we'll move on to false positives. So when it comes to false positives, this is something we've seen a lot in traditional testing tools. They often report minor changes, like a little pixel shift, as a failure, which can be kind of overwhelming to testers when you have to deal with all these non-critical alerts. That can also kind of erode some of the confidence that you might have, because frequent false positives can really lead teams to ignore test results altogether, which increases that risk of real defects slipping through. And I don't necessarily blame them, because it can be kind of a time waster when you have to debug all these false positives. That takes up your time where you could be spending it on real issues and actually being productive, right? And then finally, once again, the complexity of test suites is growing. And as it grows, managing the accuracy of results becomes even more critical to avoid a constant stream of false positives. So where does Autonomous fit in all this? Earlier, I mentioned that you can change the visual AI match algorithm, and this feature is really what allows you to focus on the changes that really matter. So in the video that we're playing now, you can see a banking app that's been tested or being tested, and it's going to be using comparing new updates. And some pages, they're going to have a lot of differences. Some pages will have a few differences, but this is where you can change that match level to make this significantly easier to maintain, so that you're only seeing what's significant. In addition, there's also dynamic regions that let you change what type of validation is being done. So you can actually verify text, currency, date, and more patterns that you can even define yourself. So you don't have to code these. Anyone can do this. And the visual AI then is able to test those, ensuring that your text or number matches a specific pattern. This is really great for examples like account numbers in banking apps, or let's say policy numbers for insurance companies. And it just automatically is catching anything that doesn't match those patterns. And usually the issue we see with visual testing is the tool is going to generate false positives, since those numbers are changing, but really it's just dynamic on data on the page that's giving expected changes we don't really want to spend a lot of time on. So apart from false positives, we have test maintenance then. And applications are constantly changing, which means you have frequent UI or backend updates that can break your tests and require constant updates to scripts, right? Or you have flaky tests. So you have tests that pass or fail unpredictably. And this could be due to environmental factors, or maybe it's just unstable locators that lead to a lot of frustration and inefficiency in your testing process. Then when it comes time to try to fix these issues, it can be pretty resource intensive, because maintaining these large test suites is sometimes a full-time job that requires significant effort to ensure that the tests remain relevant and accurate. Finally, if you're busy spending time maintaining tests, that might mean that you have some slow response times. So teams might fall behind in updating tests, or leading to outdated test suites that fail to detect new defects and new features. One of the really helpful parts of Autonomous is that it is pretty self-maintaining. So it has self-healing technology that's going to help manage changes, but avoiding locators is obviously generally recommended for robustness. But the thing I want to mention here is that tests are based on visual elements rather than locators, which makes it more robust to any technology changes. So as long as the app is remaining the same with the same look and feel, the test should continue to work, and it can find exactly what's going on in the UI. And if you're using locators and it has changed in the actual code, Autonomous isn't going to fail the test for that, and it's able to self-heal without you needing to go and check all of those different things. So something interesting in the video here that you're going to be seeing is that you're writing steps in plain English, but part of it being self-maintaining is it can autocorrect any syntax errors, say a typo that you might make, but you can also use some intent data, which is really interesting. Like here you can see that we told it to use the name of a Disney character. So that's just a really fun and interesting feature. All right, so we are on our last challenge here, a la carte platforms. We see, again, on average, teams are using 6 to 8 different tools to handle visual testing, API testing, functional testing, what have you. And a lot of times, all these different platforms and tools can cause fragmented workflows because you have a lot of teams that are relying on all these different tools for different types of testing, which can give you disconnected processes and inefficiencies. Then you also have the challenge of trying to integrate all this information. There can be some complexity there. If you're trying to combine outputs from various platforms into a cohesive workflow, that can just get kind of cumbersome. And again, it can be kind of error prone. Not to mention the cost of licensing all these different tools can get really expensive, especially for larger teams or organizations that have tight budgets, which a lot of us do right now, right? Again, going back to learning, it's learning overload. You have to train team members on multiple different platforms, and that increases onboarding time, it reduces your overall productivity, and it leads to potentially consistency issues. So when you have disparate tools all over the place, ensuring consistent testing practices and standards across the team can get really difficult. So Autonomous is an all-in-one platform, and it serves as really a one login platform so rather than buying, let's say, APIs tool, a functional testing tool, visual testing tool, it consolidates that and integrates visual, functional, and API testing into a single workflow so that you can really ensure quality end to end. And apart from that, Autonomous is a 100% SaaS tool. So you're testing in the browser, you can test cross-device and cross-browser to test your public and internal apps on any device, browser, operating system, and screen size. And the team here is really good about keeping those up to date as well. Apart from that, and just testing in general, oftentimes you need to report up and report on progress, right? So there are reporting and analytics within the platform that give you detailed dashboards and actionable insights to track and optimize your result processes. And then finally, when you have all of these different tools, that 6 to 8 different tools in your tool chain, and you can consolidate some of that down, it really helps with that budget when we've been asked to do more with less. We're reducing the licensing requirements, maintenance, integration costs, and we're just trying to save teams significant resources while streamlining those workflows. So we have made it through all our 6 challenges, and it's about time to start wrapping this up. So Pam, I'd love it if you could bring those poll results in, because I was curious about seeing some of those. Okay, so it looks like primary challenges teams are facing is test maintenance. So hopefully we covered a little bit of that and how Autonomous addresses some of those issues for you there. I think we are ready to jump into questions here.
Welcome, Tim, to the stage to help us with this. We'll start with our first question. Rishi asks, is this only limited to web apps, or does it also support mobile and desktop apps?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So currently Autonomous supports websites, web apps, mobile web apps. It does not yet support native mobile apps or desktop apps, but I should mention that our intelligent testing platform does cover desktop apps, images, PDFs, docs, whatever you need covered there from a visual testing and partially functional testing standpoint. So yeah, that's sort of the breadth of where it's at right now. Of course, we will be adding more support for mobile apps and desktop apps as we progress with the development of the product.
Some other questions that have come up. Heather, I did notice that a lot of people talked about false positives. What measures does Autonomous take to minimize false positives?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So we know that false positives can sometimes arise from flaky tests, and Autonomous is really using AI and self-healing mechanisms to address a lot of those. So it's using this AI and self-healing to adapt to minor UI changes, which reduces some of those test failures caused by dynamic elements. And the tests are based on visual elements rather than locators, which that's really what's making it more robust to underlying technology changes. So as long as that look and feel of the UI is remaining the same, the tests are going to continue to work. And if you do use element locators, the self-healing technology within Autonomous is going to manage those changes. But of course, avoiding locators is recommended generally. And then finally, it offers customizable match settings. So you can adjust the algorithm basically and the sensitivity of that to account for things like localization or branding updates or any other expected variations. And then that's going to ensure you're only seeing the relevant differences. And that's what will be triggering alerts rather than getting those pixel by pixel type differences.
So there was another question, or I guess one of the top answers on the poll was test maintenance. Tim, you want to talk about what makes test maintenance easier with Autonomous?
Yeah, sure. So, maintaining traditional test scripts, obviously time consuming. This is similar to the false positives that pop up, flaky test. So the same things that prevent false positives also help with test maintenance. So some of those self-healing capabilities that Heather was talking about, mostly for the functional testing script side of things. So as you're going through the custom flow test and recording all of those steps, just like you would with any functional testing tools, it's executing these things with the AI that we have, rather than using the locators like Heather mentioned. But when it does, we have self-healing capabilities as well for that. So that all gets automated. And from the side of doing the website scan or doing the visual snapshot test, it's very similar to the way Applitools handles things with our flagship product, Eyes, in that you're able to be able to use sort of the visual comparison to accept changes across multiple versions of the same snapshot, so across devices and browsers and whatever other environments you're using it. So you don't have to accept the change once.
Okay. And just, I'll mention this as well on the resources tab and then in the chat, there's a link. If you want to see any of this more specifically in more detail, our testing specialists would love to give you a demo and kind of show you what it looks like with your tech stack and in your use case. So there's a link where you can book a call with them to see that in more detail. Okay. We have another question from Kalani. Applitools mainly for visual testing. How does this support functional or other types of testing if we want to aim towards consolidation of automation tools under one roof?
Yeah, I can take that. So Applitools Eyes is sort of our visual testing tool that integrates through SDKs with a lot of other testing frameworks like Selenium, Cypress, Playwright. That's traditionally where Applitools has played. Autonomous is a full end-to-end testing platform. So we have functional testing capabilities with a recorder that works along with these test steps that are written out in plain English. So those cover all the functional data-driven testing that you would do in Cypress, Selenium, Playwright, and the other sort of traditional functional testing tools that are covered there. But we do it with sort of AI under the covers, so it's a lot easier for people who are non-developers to actually create and execute, maintain those tests, contribute to full end-to-end test. It also helps cover component testing, so you can do that earlier in the process as well. And Heather mentioned earlier, it also has API testing capabilities as part of that. So Autonomous can cover functional visual and API testing with one product. So if you're looking to consolidate tools, perfect tool to be doing that.
Mhm.
All right. You mentioned AI under the covers. Do we want to discuss how Autonomous actually works? Is it generating test code underneath those covers?
Yeah. So Autonomous, I will say yes to the question. No, Autonomous doesn't generate code for test steps, just to clarify that. But so in Autonomous, we are using our own deterministic language model for test creation and test step execution. And because it's deterministic, it doesn't hallucinate and it executes the same way every single time. So if the model can't understand the test step that was written by the user, we use other LLMs to translate to instructions our model can execute. And all of those can be debugged live during test creation. So it's not going to give you any surprises later on. And like we've mentioned, it doesn't use locators unless the user is really instructing it to do so. Or it's finding them. So that means that you don't have to worry about that flakiness when locators change. But even if the user does instruct the model to use a locator, Autonomous can self-heal those.
All right. And one other question that often comes up, I'll go ahead and ask it. What data is collected and used by this LLM engine? Are there any security issues with users, credentials, access?
Yeah, great question again. I think that's a big concern in general these days. So Applitools in general, as a company, we don't store anything that you wouldn't store with any other platform. So we're going to store your test and whatever is written there, and we'll store the images of the baselines and checkpoint images. And we do collect statistics and test results to provide to ensure that the product's intended functionality is working, but we do not train our models live from that data that you might provide, and we never train our models with your data ever. That has not happened. So everything needed to train our models is synthesized by us internally at Applitools, and the models get input, they provide output, but they don't store the data or learn from it. So again, nothing in your data is going to be used to train the models that serve you or any other customers.
And again, if you have questions or your team has questions about this, definitely reach out to us. We have just completed Tim can talk about how much work we've completed to ensure this with several of our customers. I do want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Heather, for a great presentation. As I mentioned, if you have other questions or would like to see something in more detail, please reach out to one of our testing specialists. There is a link where you can book a call with one of them on the resources tab. As a pioneer and leader in AI-powered automated testing for the enterprise, Applitools aims to make intelligent solutions accessible to all and to deliver unparalleled business value for our customers. If you are already using Applitools, reach out to your account team today to learn more about adding Autonomous to your tech stack. And if you're not an Applitools customer, you can see firsthand the power of Autonomous by signing up for a free trial. There's a link below and again on the resources tab. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, everyone.